Welcome to our 2018 gathering of the Nonviolent Peaceforce Midland chapter. We're really glad that you're all here to join us tonight. One of the interesting things that I learned about nonviolence in the last year was the word alone. So I have this graph up here. Nonviolence is a fairly new word in our dictionaries. It's traced to the mid-1800s when they first noticed it. And you can see that in the 1800s, not too much use. Then when you look at the 1900s, the graph really spikes. And Gandhi is largely credited with use of nonviolence, and of course Martin Luther King and many other people in the 20th century. So, and then also Nonviolent Peaceforce. It's only under 20 years old. So it's rather exciting that mankind got to this point in time where there was a need for another word. They were finally looking for, when can we find an alternative to, when can we find an alternative to violence or conflict resolution? So they needed that word, nonviolence. Pretty exciting. It shows, I think, we're moving forward. I have this slide up. How many of you were here last year? Anybody here to see? This is our, oh, great to see. Tiffany is up there. It's not a good picture of her, but the point is she is our international director. She was here last year. And just for a little update on her, one of the things I remember her telling us was what is really dear to her heart is working in the field. And that's the tough work. That's working with small groups who may be very angry with each other, who aren't used to doing anything except resorting to violence. That's what she loves to do, but of course she does office work and she travels around the world. And so recently she was in Bangladesh. I was going to show, let me just see if I have this before. This one I think is really interesting. The Nonviolent Peaceforce is in 6 different countries right now, and you can see Philippines, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Syria and Iraq, and South Sudan. Oh, there we go. So Mary, raise your hand, Mary. Mary was on a conference call, and she heard the story that Tiffany was in Bangladesh out there to see, she was in the biggest refugee camp. As you know, the Rohingya people are trying to be, or Myanmar is trying to expel them from their country, and they're going to other countries. The biggest camp is in Bangladesh. So it's an overwhelming situation. And the story was that, what could Tiffany do? She was working with a mother and a child, and they were being forced to move on. So she took the child and carried her, and the 2 of them started walking, both in tears. So what she could do was share her tears in a very huge, huge problem to solve. But still there, her heart is very much there. And that brings me tonight because we have, I'm going to go back one, you can see the place in Africa. This is the South Sudan. Tonight, we have someone who has worked as a National Protection Officer in South Sudan. But he also grew up in South Sudan, so he has seen some pretty hard times in that situation. But we are just thrilled to have him. Hunter comes to us today from San Francisco, and we've been asking him tons of questions and hearing his stories, and so we're delighted to now let him talk with you for a while. Hunter Dalli.
Thank you. It's really, really nice to be here, and I appreciate all of you being here. And thanks for the event and the host of the event. And today, before really we get into our core point, which is, working with the refugees and internal displaced people in South Sudan. First, I just want to give you a little bit of overview of the country, South Sudan. So here is before South Sudan became a country. So South Sudan used to be part of Sudan. Sorry, yeah, right there. So this used to be the biggest country in the entire continent of Africa. So after 22 years of a civil war between people from South and the government in Sudan, South Sudan became an independent country. But the conflict that took about 22 years took over 2 million lives. And 4 million others were displaced from the country, and million others more were internal displaced. And I was part of people who were internal displaced in a country. And really, during that conflict, during the 22 years of civil war before we got our independence in 2011, we went through a lot of trouble. We went through a lot of, I witnessed a lot of atrocities against people. And growing up, it's difficult. I remember living in one place. The longest we stayed was 3 months. The rest of the time, we were just moving from one place to another. And my parents was trying very hard to take care of us, of course, but there was always the bombs that were dropped on us, the ground attacks that comes at 3 o'clock in the morning. We were just running for our life every single day. We didn't have clean water, there's no food. My little brother starved. He almost died from hunger, but my mom was able to find something that we can be able to eat and stay alive. And during that civil war, from all the several attacks that happened, I do have a vivid memory of a gunship attack. So gunship is a helicopter warplane that attacks in the conflict areas. And one morning we were all together with my family. It doesn't sound familiar. Usually it used to be jets, and we could hear about jets from far away, and we could go and hide. But helicopter is a little different. The sound is not familiar to us. And when we realized that it was a warplane, it was very close. It's too close for us to get away. And then the talk started. I was watching the soldiers standing on the window of their helicopter shooting on us. I was hiding behind this big mahogany tree. My sister got hurt. The shrapnels went through her ribs and broke 2 of her ribs. I was terrified. After the helicopters left, a lot of people got killed. Some of the people from neighborhoods came and they took her, put her on a bed structure, and they took her to Doctors Without Borders. They took her away and tried to treat her. It took her about 6 months for her to come back home. After she came back home until today, she has problem carrying water, which is one of the things that women back home mostly do, firewood. She can't carry heavy items. After that, my dad, who used to dig the foxholes for us, who tried to encourage us to go and hide, he gave up. He said he can't do this anymore. People gave up hope. People don't have hope anymore to live. All of us in the family and the rest of the community, we feel like it's better to die than to be alive. People are tired of keeping lists of people who are in the neighbors who die on a daily basis. If attacks happen, we will know, that neighbor died, the kids died, and people are tired of keeping track of that. And after, my sister came back, we were not in the same place that we were when the gunship attack happened. We moved. And then we had to find information about her when she came back, then she got right back to the house. There's a strategy that my family used to keep us safe. The strategy was that they separate us. They put one family with my uncle and part of my siblings with my uncle and my aunt, and some of their kids came and stayed with us, hoping that if an attack happens and the bombs were dropped on one family, the other family will be alive. I went through that all my life, and that's what I know. It's conflict, it's attacks, and that happens on a daily basis. In 2011, we got independent with a promise that we're going to have education, we're going to have healthcare services, we're going to have infrastructures, we are going to have development in the country. But that did not take so long. In 2013, there's a new civil war that started. I was there. I was in one of the most affected areas during the Civil War. Today, according to the UN, there's about 3.1 million people that moved now displaced from South Sudan and they're in the neighboring countries. And more than 1.7 million are internal displaced. And I was just reading this like 2 days ago in New York Times that about 383,000 people got killed from 2013 up to today. So that conflict ruined a lot of life. People are living the way that nobody would think that someone should live that way. This picture is from my village, and this is what happened most of the time. So this will be our homes, and this is some of the kids that the bombs were dropped and everything got lost. Everything's gone here. And this is part of the shrapnels that you'll see, and these are the things that kill people, and part of this is what hurt my sister. Well, the question here is, how did I become to get involved with Nonviolent Peaceforce after all going through this in my entire life? So before we get to that, I just want to give you a little bit of heads up on how I started how actually to speak English. So growing up, moving from this one location to another, my dad used to teach us how to read and write in our local language. And the idea is for us to learn how to read Bible. And that's the only book they have. And that's the only thing that keep people strong in front of any conflict, like violence. If during this violence, all people do is depend on the Bible to keep that strength, keep moving during this conflict. So that's how I started learning how to read and write. In 2008, after a comprehensive peace agreement, the ceasefire agreement was signed between South Sudan and the government of Sudan. There were 2 Ugandan teachers who came to South Sudan and started teaching kids how to read and write in English. I was part of these kids who were sitting there underneath the mango tree, writing on the ground the alphabets of A, B, C, D. That's how we started in 2008. I learned English for 3 years from these Ugandan teachers. And that is how I get to have a basic communication in English to start spreading the word of nonviolent and using unarmed civilian peacekeeping as a method to resolve conflict and protect civilians in one of these most affected areas. So that was me in South Sudan trying to spread the news of unarmed civilian peacekeeping in a situation where conflict was running, the violence is what is running in people's blood. It was very difficult. People called me all kinds of names. I was coward. I was letting my family to die, though if I would be able to go and fight back, because that's all people know. The cycle of the violence that was going on in the communities. So I joined the Nonviolent Peaceforce. Nonviolent Peaceforce went in my community because there was a conflict that was happening between my own community and the community from neighboring state. My communities are the farmers, and the neighboring communities are the cattle keepers. So this conflict started. I was part of the conflict, I would say, because when one of the guys who was killed from my community, when he was killed, the youth from my side gathered, and they're gonna go for a revenge, and that's what people do. And then I was rounded up to go and fight. That day, at the daytime, we went and we were sitting underneath this big tree. They're bringing more people to go and fight in revenge. And the slogan was that if the guy who died, they ask the rest of the family members not to bury him until somebody is killed from the other side. So that day, I witnessed a lot of horrible things that happened. There was a guy who was brought and killed in front of us. And in my mind, I was thinking, this guy is innocent. He don't know anything. He got killed. The person who died, he has no idea who killed that person. But he died because he's part of that tribe. So in that evening, I speak to the youth leader. I said, please, I'm ready. I want to go and fight, but I'm missing some stuff back home. I want something that, like some clothes that will make me warm. I want something. And then I want to go home and bring it, and then tomorrow we'll go. And then he said, okay, fine. You should go and make sure you come back. I'm like, yes, of course, I will come back. I went home. I arrived at night, and I wake my dad up. I said, Dad, I'm back, and I don't want to go back to that place. He said, if that's what you think, I will support your idea. I try to get you out as soon as I can. Following morning, he put me in a truck and sent me to a different county. And the youth group from my community went and revenged. More than 38 people were killed for that one person that was killed. The youth group from that side mobilized and came back and attacked. More than 50 people were killed from my own community. My community organized and went back. The death toll was more than 100 people, and they don't know what to do. And Nonviolent Peaceforce was living in the nearest county, and they came and they want to try to intervene to this conflict, but then nobody was there to convey the message to the local community because nobody speaks the language. And then they put up advertisements on the trees asking that if someone can join them. I applied with Nonviolent Peaceforce, and I was shortlisted. During the interview, I begged Nonviolent Peaceforce to give me that job. I said, I really want to do this. Fair enough, they picked me. The first time they took me to the field, to training, I did the training with Nonviolent Peaceforce. The first time, I know that there's a way that human beings can respond to conflict without using gun. It's the first time that I know that there's another alternative for people to solve the conflict without using gun. And then I said, we are tired. We stayed 22 years in a fight. After 22 years, what happened was that the government of Sudan and the rebel group in South Sudan went and sat down and signed a peace deal. So we as a community, we can do something about this. So we went, the first time after the training, we went to the field side, and there was a lot of setbacks. The community leaders don't want to talk to us because someone got killed from our community, they just want to go on revenge. And I was frustrated. And I speak to the chief. I said, look, the person who was killed that you were talking about, that was my cousin. If anything, I'm carrying the pain more than you are. So this has been going on for a really long time. There's a story behind this that it's just the cycle of violence. We didn't solve it, so let's try to listen to what Nonviolent Peaceforce has before we start judging Nonviolent Peaceforce. So hearing that from us, he gave us a schedule to come back, and then we went back and he sat with us down, and he said if we can convince the other group, then he don't have a problem. I said, okay, from now, talk to the youth leaders to stop going to fight. We will try to talk to the people from that side. Nonviolent Peaceforce had two teams, from this side of the state and from the other side of the state. We spoke to every single chief that was in the borders in trying to convince them to try to talk to the chiefs from the other side to see if they can make this possible happen. Nonviolent Peaceforce asked these community leaders, where do you think that you can meet that will be safe for you and for that side so that you won't be scared of any other people coming to attack you? They choose a location. Then they were convinced. They went and sat down for 3 days, agreed to come up with solutions to that conflict. Until today, these two communities are coexisting with the help of Nonviolent Peaceforce. And this is the picture. This is during the event. After everybody agreed, everybody was happy here, and then the communities from both sides, they are happy that they have a peace. And then with the help of Nonviolent Peaceforce, they created what is called community protection team from both sides to oversee this peace deal. And if there's any other information about conflict that want to arise, then these two community protection team will communicate. They will be able to resolve it before it gets into conflict. We didn't stop there. Once that is set and there's a community protection team, one of the biggest problems in South Sudan is that the soldiers are recruiting kids to go and fight for themselves, for them. So between 2012 and 2014, Nonviolent Peaceforce was working with about 5,000 children that are driven from Sudan war to South Sudan, and they don't have their families. Some of them lost their families in the war, and some of them got separated because they ran into different directions during the war. So we were working with these kids. And one night, we went to these compounds. This group came in and abducted. What we heard from other children were that they abducted about between 25 to 35 kids. These kids were gone. So we don't know who abducted these kids, because there are several rebel groups in that area, and there's also government soldiers. And both government and rebel groups recruit kids to go and fight. And then, since one of Nonviolent Peaceforce's work is to work with the community and build a relationship with the community, we tried to talk to the chiefs and try to ask them what happened. During that conversation, the chiefs gave us the list of 95 children that were all abducted. And we don't know if these kids were sent to war, fought twice, or already fought several times. And then we were like, okay, do you know who abducted these kids? They said, yes, we have a general idea of what group might have taken these kids. Then they told us the name of the group that abducted the kids. So we're like, yes, we will try our best and talk to this group. And we started a negotiation with some of these rebel leaders. It took us up to 3 months to talk to the person. Talk to the person that makes the decision on how to release these kids. Most times, in these 3 months, we would go and talk to the commanders, some of the commanders, and they will say, no, we can't make the decision to release these kids. And when we talked to the commander-in-chief, he said he don't have kids recruited here. And I got really frustrated, and I know that there are kids there. So I just came out of nowhere. I was like, look, I'm going to speak to you as South Sudanese. Just take away everything, but I'm going to speak to you as someone from this country. I know what you are fighting for. I know the movement that what you're fighting for is for the community. And I am part of the community that you're fighting for. And these children are part of this community that you're fighting for. I just want to tell you that if you release these kids might help you tomorrow or next tomorrow in a different way. They might be the kids that are going to present your movement into the international community. If you allow them to go and study and actually grow up and help you tomorrow. Or even if they are adults, when they go to fight, they're not going to fight as kids, they're going to fight as adults for you. And he just looked at me and he's like, he said, I don't want to talk to you today. What about come on this day? So I'm like, sure, we left. When we came back on the date that he set, he has at least 28 kids. And he asked these kids to go back to the community with a condition that we should not report this in any international community. That was like, he said if he heard that we or any of this in the international media, we would pay for it. So I was like, no, we're not going to report this. All I want is the understanding, and then we will take these kids back to their communities. But here comes the challenge. These are kids that have been associated with armed conflict for a really long time, and they have guns. And some of these kids were brainwashed. They don't want to go back to their families anymore. And some of these families doesn't want to take these kids anymore. The kids were struggling with the idea that they're going to go back to the community without their guns. And we, as Nonviolent Peaceforce group, then we started to try to look into this in a different way, try to convince these kids to go back and join their family. And basically what we try to do is to see if they can compare between being in the army and going back to the family. Being in a front line where most of their friends got killed, or either be safer with their family in the house. And of course, we do have proofs of some of these battlefields where a lot of these kids got killed. And then we would try to tell them what happened exactly in the battlefield and what they might expect from back home. These kids agree to go back to their families. Now, what about their families? What are we going to do about these families? There are some families that they really want their kids back right now. And there are some families that they say, no, they don't want these kids back because these kids are going to cause more troubles in the community. Then we would also go to them and we were like, look, the best thing for you to do is to take these kids. One, because I went to, the town is called Bentiu. I went to Bentiu yesterday, and what happened was that, and this is the war, and this is how many people were killed. And I saw some of these families, the pictures that I took in Bentiu, just trying to tell them that this will only be the best way for you to, like, encourage them that this is the only best way for you to do because you need your kids back. Otherwise, this is the same thing that's going to happen. These communities were able to take these kids back, and then some of the families that we don't know, we start to talk to these children and trying to identify where and what chief and what community they came from to try to go and reunify them back to the community. After reunification, once we have the family of these kids, we would use what we call protective presence. So we would go with these kids personally up to where we want to reunify them. And after accompanying them there, most of the time these families will have a big ceremony where they will try to welcome these kids back home, and there will be food, there will be other kids singing and ceremony and to let all these kids, feel at home. Doing this work was difficult. There was a lot of challenges, not only within the community, but with the entire the government and the rebel group. So the government sometimes don't allow us to go and have access to the most vulnerable group in the country. So the rebel group, we were accused of being spies. We were accused of going there to get information so we can make it vulnerable for the government to go and attack the rebel group. Today, some of the people who do the same kind of work that I do got killed. From 2013 up to this month, there's about 108 workers killed in South Sudan because they're doing the kind of work that I'm doing. But no staff, nonviolent staff, was not part of any of these casualties. And this is partially because of the relationship that NP have with the military group, the government, and also the communities. With all this said, I would say, the best thing we can do, not only as a humanity, but really like people who make decisions on behalf of other countries. For example, really the UN. Today there's about 17,000 armed soldiers of UN in South Sudan trying to be there to protect civilians. But there's no impact of that. What I would say is, if UN can send more unarmed civilian peacekeepers to South Sudan, and then the armed civilian peacekeepers, I think that will be the best way for us to live in peace. Thank you.
So we're going to have a little time for question and answers. Anybody have a question? I'm going to bring out the microphone to you.
Yes, Hunter, I would like you to talk about the girls and the women and just that dynamic that happens.
So I was talking about children here. So really, like with children, I was trying to generalize, but part of these children that were abducted were also girls. So what they do with girls in the first place is they use them as their wives, and that's it goes from the age of 13 to 15. And this military group, I just don't have heart to hold the information and just trying to think about why would someone do that in the first place. The women in general, the conditions of women in South Sudan is horrible. I hate it. I hate how men treat women in South Sudan. I have a little story of my own family. So in my family, it's not only in my family, but there's the system of arranged marriage in South Sudan. Your parents, not necessarily your parents, mostly it's your your uncles will decide who you can marry, and you don't have an objection. You have to just go with that. So my elder sisters, got arranged marriage, and I went with their husband. But the little one that we have, our last born, I begged my uncle, I begged him to not give her away. I asked him that I want to send my little sister to school. And I sent her to school, to high school in the border of Congo. She started there until she finished her high school this year. I got her from there to the capital city. And it was very hard to get her to capital city because the roads were all closed. The military were everywhere. So I speak to someone in Juba, which is the capital city of South Sudan, saying, I have my sister in the border of Congo. I want to get her to Juba, but I don't know how. He said, I will get your sister to Juba, but I need some support. I need some money. I was like, okay, I will send you some money. It was difficult for me to send money in Juba because the what they call the Western Union pulled out from Juba because of the war. So I sent money to someone in Uganda to pick it up, sent it to Juba, gave it to that guy. He took his motorcycle. He went on the shortcuts all the way where my sister is. I told my uncle that I'm sending my sister to Juba. He was not happy with that because mostly, women, of course, are used as source of income. It's dowry. People, they're going to pay dowry to give her away. So he was upset. But I said, he said, if anything happened to my sister, it's going to be my responsibility. I agreed. And I talked to my sister, and she said, yeah, she will take that risk. She got into that motorcycle with that guy, came all the way, today she's in Juba. And my plan is to send her to school to Uganda to see if he can prove people wrong. Women are not part of any decision making in South Sudan, whether in community level, family level, or even in the government level. And I want to see if that can change.
Anybody else?
Oh, Kathy.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now in the United States and how this will help your country? Any thoughts you have on that?
Yes, so during all the peace building and conflict resolution in South Sudan, and all during the child protection to try to help these kids, I decided to come to the United States, and I'm doing information system, which is the IT, the information technology. And the idea behind that was really that before even I get to US, when I was working with these kids, we had a lot of issues where some of these kids that were rescued, they're waiting for the time when they will be reunified with their families. At some point, these kids moved from the camps that they were at to a different refugee camp. And then we would find their families who were ready to take them in, and when we go back, these kids are not there anymore. And then we couldn't find them at all. So I was thinking that if we have a system, a database system, an application that different companies, organizations that are working on child protection can use, that they can see it in real time, the information about kids, then it will make it easy and efficient for people who are in the field to be able to reunify these kids very, very soon, as soon as we find the information. Like a couple months ago, I was reading about the kids in the southern border, the kids that were separated from their families in the Mexican border. So, of course, I think this, this is the United States, it's going to be very easy. No, it wasn't. They don't have a system to trace the families of kids. It was even a problem here in the US. So I was like, oh, so that was not only us in South Sudan. So that's why I chose to study information technology instead of studying peace building and conflict resolution, so that I can help the kids.
Hi. Could you give a little bit of detail about, you described the killings that occurred between the youth groups in your community and the other community? When Nonviolent Peaceforce went in, what specific strategies did they use to negotiate the cessation of violence between those communities?
So one of the strategies that that I think works for me as someone from Nonviolent Peaceforce and also from someone from that particular that community is the fact that we were talking about giving them a scenario of most of the conflicts that people have, and one of which was in South Sudan. And we talked also about situations like in South Africa, where people group that were fighting against apartheid regime, try to use use violence to try to solve the conflict, but it didn't work. We talk about the 22 years of civil war in South Sudan. It did not work. When you use arms against arms, people will only get angrier and angrier and increase the death toll in the country. So we give them the example of what happened in these different scenarios and tell them that the only thing that happened to resolve that conflict was for these two groups to come and sit down and talk about the conflict. So if we know the root cause of the conflict, then we will be able to come up with resolutions on how we can deal with these conflicts. And that's one thing that worked for us as one strategy, but also like building the relationship with these communities helped a lot.
Any specific, how do you go about building relationships between people who have been killing each other? I know it's a big question, but.
Yeah, yes. Well, the thing here is that, during these conflicts, people are really angry.
Right.
Because, their parents or their brothers or, close relatives were killed. But also the thing is this. Yes, we were going to kill back. Yes, that's right. But what do you think is going to be the effect of that? So that's usually what we try to tell people. So just thinking not only for today, but think about tomorrow. If you kill today, they're going to kill you back tomorrow. It is going to be your family. Tomorrow is going to be your mom, your child, can be someone that's close to you. Then that way you will try to get them back into their sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hunter's been right in there with these discussions. And I want to just add, because I was looking up, and one of my big question was, what are they really doing? How do they work out in the field? So I did a letter to the editor, so I had to do my research. And a couple of things, the way they build up the confidence in the community. One of the things, and you showed it on one of your slides, protective accompaniment. A lot of times women have to carry water, or you mentioned wood too. NP, the peacekeepers accompany women to the well and back. And so their presence becomes known. They have built up their reputation. I know you told us how they were so well received. People trusted and knew that after many times like this, one of our favorite stories I think I heard from Jean, and I don't remember the country, but it was in a conflict area, and the militia was coming. There were 2 peacekeepers protecting women and children. They knew the militia was approaching. They gathered them all into a building, and the NP people stood at the door. The militia approached. They stood, no violence at all. They stood there, you can't enter. And I believe they tried a number of times and finally went away. So one more time, violence was not allowed. Mary, you want to add to that?
Would you speak about the women peace teams and how they're recruited and how many there are?
Okay, at this time, Hunter, let's turn it over to Amy because we want to move around. Thank you. I know you're ready to move along. This is next on our program anyway. So this is Amy Hansen. She comes from our office in St. Paul. And she started out with an international degree, international relations? Development.
Yeah.
Was there a word after development?
I did international development and anthropology.
Oh, and anthropology. And did an internship with NP and is now, that got her working in the office. She does some traveling. She's had met Hunter before out in San Francisco for a gathering. So she has talked with lots of people in NP. So I'm going to turn it right over to you right now.
Hi, nice to meet you. So yeah, this is, I'll almost be 5 years working with Nonviolent Peaceforce and getting to meet lovely people like Hunter and our other staff around the world. Mary had a question about the women's peacekeeping teams in South Sudan. So Nonviolent Peaceforce works with women who want to create peace in their community and want to be part of the decision-making processes. And women, I believe Hunter mentioned this when we were speaking the other day, women are the people who are most affected by conflict. They're the ones who get the most hurt, women and children. So it makes sense that they should be involved in the decision-making process. So right now, Nonviolent Peaceforce has trained 1,900 women in South Sudan. We have 40 peacekeeping teams. That's doubled in the last couple years. And the women have done amazing things. They have stopped children from being recruited as soldiers. They've intervened in cases of domestic violence. So there's areas of South Sudan that are very, very remote. There's no other organizations working there. We had one village, there was one organization that did maternal care, but they aren't there all the time, so our staff are living right in the community. And so the only way to respond to something like domestic violence is through the community. And so women's peacekeeping teams are trained in armed civilian protection, and when violence happens in the community, the women know they have a resource, they have other women they can go and talk to find a solution. So like the one instance where they're in a remote village, there was a case where a man came home and he wanted to have relations with his wife, and she had had 7 children already. The doctor told her, you cannot have any more children, it will put you in danger. And so now that she had the women's peacekeeping teams, she knew she had a resource she could go to. She went to other women's peacekeeping teams members, told them what was happening, they got her to safety, and then they came up with a solution. They strategized what they would do if something like this happened. They talked to the man's friend, who talked to him about the situation and explained why it was important to do family planning and why it put his wife in danger. And the man acted better after that. So we have, when we start to change these things at community level, that starts to change norms. So in the future, you can also change laws and So, and we also have like women's peacekeeping teams where in the beginning, the men were like, what are you doing? They're angry. And now women are actually brought conflicts and asked to resolve them. So they say, you know, you can go to the traditional leaders and bring your conflict there. And I believe is it the Tribunal Council? Yeah, you can bring your conflict to the Tribunal Council and they'll give you a fine, or you can go to the women's peacekeeping teams and they'll actually resolve the conflict for you. Anyway, so I was actually just going to focus a little bit, tell you a little bit more about some of the other work that Nonviolent Peaceforce is doing with children in the other countries we work in. So this photo here, we actually had a photojournalist who lives in Iraq who was able to take some photos with us. So there's a little child in these big oversized shoes. And if you go to the camps, there's a lot of children who are unaccompanied wandering around. So that's part of the work. Oops, how is it going? Okay, thank you. So part of the work is, you know, protecting children who are unaccompanied and making sure that they are with their family, and if they're not, finding their family, working to reunite them. But so Nonviolent Peaceforce started working in Iraq last year. And we were invited there by UN OCHA, who worked with Nonviolent Peaceforce in South Sudan and saw the work that was being done. And one day at the camp, a group of 1,400 women and children arrived. So a lot of small children and a lot of women. And actually, these women were the former wives of ISIS. And so the Iraqi soldiers were very angry at them. Now, one of the staff told us that a lot of these women were like 14 years old when they were married to these men. So they're innocent. They didn't choose to be the wives of ISIS. They don't support ISIS. But the Iraqi soldiers, you know, have been very affected by ISIS. And so they were very angry. They were threatening the women. And during the day, there's other humanitarian organizations in the camp. At night, though, the people who are distributing aid go elsewhere. And so the women needed protection overnight, and and the children. So that's why Nonviolent Peaceforce got a call. They were very traumatized. The first thing they asked our staff was, are you going to sell us to the UN to be trafficked now? And so our staff worked with the women. They weren't Iraqi. They're from different countries, Azerbaijan, Turkey. We have a Syrian Kurdish staff whose life has also been affected by ISIS. And he worked with a woman. He said, you know, it's very good that Nonviolent Peaceforce is nonpartisan, helping people. He translated for them, figured out that some of the women, they're wearing burqas, needed like life-saving medical care. He accompanied them to get medical care. They were very afraid to be separated from the group and get medical care and ask for help because they didn't know what would happen to them. So that's one of the things that we did to protect women and children in Iraq. In Myanmar, our staff, we have a small number of staff. They've trained 700 people since 2012. And we train civilians to monitor the ceasefire between the government and ethnic armed groups. Now they're called peace observers. They've secured the release of child soldiers. They've they've talked to armed groups to do temporary ceasefires to get civilians to safety. And they've facilitated dialogue between communities and authorities. So there was one case where recently there's a factory and there's boys working there, which is another issue. But so boys from 10 to 16 years old. And in this case, 13 boys were taken from the factory by armed groups. And the parents tried to get them back, and the armed groups wouldn't give them back. And the government was angry and saying the factory supplying the soldiers to armed groups when they hadn't. So the community, the parents in the community knew that people were trained by Nonviolent Peaceforce and asked them for help. So those people went to the armed groups, had a meeting with them where they talked for 2 hours. They talked about how this is a violation of the bilateral ceasefire and the protection of civilians. And their meeting ended. 2 weeks later, they got a call and they said, come and meet us here. They went there and they released all the boys to them. And so they accompanied them back to their home.
Amy,
Yeah.
would you please talk about the Zoom conference we had?
Sure.
Women who are being trained, and how passionate they are.
Sure. Do you mind if I add that on later when we talk about the message? That's
We're
okay.
talking about the country.
Okay. Oh, yeah. We did have some Zoom calls with the women in Myanmar, and they were very, very happy to see people from another country who are supporting their work. They said, you know, their work is very hard. They were telling us about some of what they're doing, and they're saying that we're standing up for women's rights. And for some of us, it's very hard. It's even creating issues in our marriage. So to me, I'm like, wow, that's like, I can't imagine that. Just not having, you know, standing up for my rights would make my husband upset with me. It's not a situation that I can imagine being in. So this is in the Philippines. Last year, there was an attack, and militants related with ISIS attacked a town. A lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people were displaced, and children were taken as hostages. So in this photo, Nonviolent Peaceforce was accompanying the children who were hostages and brought them back to be reunited with their families. And then here we're doing follow-up with other organizations. So making sure the children are okay, referring them to agencies that can meet other needs like psychosocial needs, and accompanying them to appointments and make sure they're safe. So this is a quote from, to close what I'm saying, I wanted just to tell you a little bit about how I got into the work that I'm doing. So growing up, I came from, probably like some of you, I came from a suburban, almost rural town. And the population, I had, my friend's Asian, and she was the only person of color in our whole town. And so I had everything I needed. You know, we grew up very economically. So my parents didn't go out and eat at restaurants or buy coffee, and we shopped at the thrift store. And but I was fairly isolated from the rest of the world. My dad had a high school education. My mom had a 1-year nursing certificate. We never watched the news, so I didn't know a lot about the world. But you know, I did a lot of volunteer projects through school, and one day I went to a presentation, and that presentation was on Haiti. And the woman who came talked to us about, showed us pictures of children who were malnourished and explained the different types of malnutrition, wet malnutrition, dry malnutrition, and she told us stories about the people she met, and I think that was the first time it really clicked for me that around the world, people don't have what we have. And there was one picture where a baby had been thrown in the trash because his parents couldn't take care of him. He got bitten by a rat. He contacted polio. But he actually ended up being okay. He completed school. He got a medical degree. So anyway, during that experience, I thought, I need to go there. I need to show people that people care about them, that there's other people around the world who care what's happening to them. And as I got older, I thought, well, that was a kind of thought. But actually, I've heard a lot of the same thoughts from our staff who work in the field and people who support the message. So this is something that one of our staff said. He said he works in Iraq. We really build relationships with people. We show up and tell people we care about them, especially the vulnerable and the lonely people. We give them hope, just our being there, even if we can't help. We drink their tea, take their time, we listen to them. We tell them how we understand them, how hard it is, that we care for them, and that we're trying to fix this. Nobody will take our spots to do this. This is Amki in Iraq. So, from that too, you start to learn who are the vulnerable people in the community. You start to build relationships. And you give people the most, this is something I stole from our co-founder, but I think it's really true. You give them the best gift you can give them. And so this is a quote from, I'm going to say this wrong, Thich Nhat Hanh. The most precious gift we can offer others is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. And so, to end, I think all of you who have supported the work have also offered that to the people who are in the countries that Nonviolent Peaceforce is working in. So I want to thank you for that. We have a couple of things we would like you to ask you to do today. And also, what you do really makes a difference. It really matters. The program in South Sudan started from individuals like you, came together, who donated, and with a small amount of money, well, not a small amount, but with $30,000 relatively, the program was started in South Sudan. And then once the program started, they were able to secure grants, and now South Sudan has the largest program for Nonviolent Peaceforce. So, what you do really makes a difference. So today I would like to ask you, I know a lot of you have already donated, but there are envelopes on your table. If you would like to make a donation to Nonviolent Peaceforce, and you haven't done so already, that would really help a lot. The other thing I would like to ask you to do is Mary has cards. And, like Hunter was saying, it's really hard sometimes to do this work. People call you a coward because you're not fighting for your community or for your family. Women are asked, what are they doing? Standing up for women's rights or trying to work nonviolently. And it really touches people if you write them a message and let them know that you support them. So Mary's giving cards. So both of those things would really help if you are able to do that. Thank you.
So have you wondered, while you've been sitting there, how is it that here in Midland, we had the international director here last year, and we have,
Just say something quickly. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Additionally, if anybody wants to make a credit card donation, I do have a square reader. Sorry, that's all I wanted. And the Nonviolent Peaceforce chapter members, you can give them, if you fill out the cards or an envelope, you can give them to the chapter members.
and of course you can take an envelope home and at your own. So back to the wonderful people that come here from Nonviolent Peaceforce. Our international director was here. We've had our donor relations person here. We have Hunter, who came from South Sudan originally. And we even had co-founder Mel Duncan here back in 2011. The reason that these people come to Midland, Michigan is because of the founder who started the Midland chapter of Nonviolent Peaceforce. This is a person who lives and breathes peace. And she had been in contact and been supporting the Peace Force for some time. and then invited our co-founder Mel Duncan here, so he's already been here years ago. Now I would like to introduce you to Jean Shaw.
I wanted to have you all see this peace pole that is here that was created by Mike Percha, Blessed Sacrament, and I had connected with Lynn Pike there near the beginning of the year and asked if the students would maybe save pennies for us is what I asked. And she developed this she got this created here. They filled it up pretty well. They called it little change for peace, right, is what they called it. They raised almost $300 that was going to go to a family or families in South Sudan. So my thought is on this, of course, to thank them again, but also to say if there's anybody you know that you might get a group of young people saving some coins for change, that would be a wonderful thing to have happening. And actually, Amy and Hunter went to Blessed Sacrament yesterday, right? So they got to speak to them, to see them, right, when they came in on Thursday? Yes, okay. And our Midland chapter, the Nonviolent Peaceforce, was started in 2011. That was when Mel Duncan first came to Midland, and he spoke at the First United Methodist Church, and thanks to Dorothy Arthur, and who is it that's here from the First United Methodist? Right there, right? So we have been hosted our meetings. We meet 4 times a year. They have all been hosted there all along. And other things, we've had other speakers. We've had a training. The last thing we had down there was a training. We connect with the Rotary, which is a wonderful connection with our NP chapter. And we brought in a trainer for conflict resolution. So that was a wonderful thing that the First United Methodist has done for us.
St. John's
Yes, and St. John's
was the conflict resolution.
yes, they hosted us also. And yes, and that was good to have Hunter and Amy there yesterday. So they've been meeting with a lot of people, which is wonderful. And I wanted to say to you, Mel Duncan was one of the co-founders. He and, I forget the other man's name, but what Mel Duncan has said more than once is a woman named Mary Lou Otts, who is a part of the Minneapolis area Nonviolent Peaceforce group. He said she is the mother of the Nonviolent Peaceforce. So I think, again, it's wonderful what all the men have done, but to have the woman who really, he gives the credit to initiating this, and it actually was initiated in 2002. So I think we need to give a standing ovation to Mary Lou Otts, who I have met before, to thank her for what she did in terms of getting, and you can sit if you want, but to please give her an ovation. Thank you. And also, speaking of Rotarians, it is great that we have 3 new Rotarians who are a part of our Nonviolent Peaceforce chapter now. Tawny Nell, Gail Hoffman, who is here, and Harry Grether also, so that's great. And Tom Lane, Gail's husband, is also very supportive of us, and it's just great to be that connection with Rotary. And Randy Kawakita, who's a part of our MP chapter, she and I are part of the Noon Rotary Club's youth group, along with Gail. And we're also, Randy and I are also part of the Violence Prevention Partnership Committee that is a part of the Midland Community Foundation. So it's wonderful to have these connections and the growing support for nonviolence, and also Rotary's long, long history of nonviolence too. So it's hopeful, hopeful, hopeful all the time. First of all, if you are an NP chapter member, please raise your hand. We know everybody is not here by any means, but it's been great. We want to thank you all for what you have done to organize this. lots of time and energy that has gone into it, so it's priceless for me to head this up, but to have the tremendous team that we've had all along, and even growing more tremendously over the years. So I'm just, can't even think of the right words to say to thank everybody so much. Also wanted to let you know that Ben Thorpe from WCMU interviewed Hunter and Amy yesterday. There was a brief announcement of this gathering, and he needed to take a little more time to do this, get the interview out and have it aired. So he's figuring it's going to be next week. So if you can kind of keep your ear out for that from WCMU, that would be good to have more people hear about it and maybe let other people know as well. Now, if I've forgotten anything or thanking anybody, I apologize for that. I want to end by singing a little song, and this got me thinking of this one when I was hearing Hunter. So I've heard him 3 times speaking since he's been here, and it touches me deeply every time. And so, hold this. Oops, I'll leave it there. It's fine. No, that's fine. I'll hold it because I can hold it with one hand. But the thing with Hunter that got me so touched was it connected it up with what we try to do in the schools. We have 7 members of our Nonviolent Peaceforce, and they happen to all be women at this point. But we go into the schools, and we'll be going into 3 of the schools this year. And so when Hunter was talking about himself as a younger person and trying to figure out if there was a better way to deal with conflict, and when you just were talking a little bit ago about what's the effects tomorrow if you continue to have violence today. So when we work with the kids in the schools, we try to help them understand that there are other ways to deal with a bully or somebody who's just been mean to you or whatever. Instead of striking back, there's a way that you can continue to build relationships. And even if that person has done something really mean to you, there's a way you go to the teacher, or you can work things out where you can invite them to be a part of what you're doing in the classroom, even though it's been a negative experience, but maybe you can build something positive out of that. So this is this little song I want to sing. And I want to dedicate it to Hunter this time because of that whole thing of building relationships before being violent. When he was just talking about that. And also, again, thinking about tomorrow. So we always say the younger we can work with the kids, the better it is. I think you're wonderful when somebody says that to me. I feel wonderful, as wonderful can be. It makes me want to say the same thing to somebody new. And by the way, I've been meaning to say, I think you're wonderful too. When each one of us feels important inside, loving and giving and glad we're alive. Oh, what a difference we'll make in each day, all because someone decided to say, I think you're wonderful. When somebody says that to me, I feel wonderful, as wonderful can be. It makes me want to say the same thing to somebody new. And by the way, I've been meaning to say, I think you're wonderful too. If we practice this phrase in the most honest way, find something special in someone each day, we'll lift up the world one heart at a time. It all starts by saying that
I just have to add, we're finished, but when we go into the schools and when Jean can make one, she starts out the class, they're 20, 30 minutes. She starts out singing a little something for them. And then at the end of that time, you can imagine what this does to the kids. It's just, they love it. So thank you, Jean, for that was just beautiful.
Thank you so much for coming. And if you, please stay and write if you're so inclined. I hope you are. And if Jeannie and I will be circulating to pick up your note cards or your donation envelopes, and we don't count if you do or not. You're welcome to leave, but thank you so much for coming.